Welcome to the Lapsus Lima podcast. Please support us at lapsuslima.com.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Lapsus Lima podcast. Today we have an interview with Narendra Dengle. He is an architect, educationist, and writer. He has taught at the SPA New Delhi. His practice since 1974 has evolved around cultural, contextual, and aesthetic issues. His works have been featured in journals of architecture in India, France, South Africa, Italy, China, and the UAE. His books include The Discovery of Architecture, a contemporary treatise on ancient values, and Indigenous Reality. So, welcome.
Thank you, David. Well, this book that you mentioned, The Discovery of Architecture, this somehow reached Christopher Alexander at some point in time. And we had this email from Sergio Porta. And suddenly he said, I was there on a holiday. In the middle of the lunch, Maggie produced this small book. And they said, this is a treasure of the highest order. And so we were quite excited. I mean, we have been reading Christopher for ages. And so that's how, and then after so many, and then we had this correspondence also with both of them for some time. And then we received a mail from Sergio and Maggie. And then we had this conference call, four of us. My co-author also participated in this call, Muni Ganju, and the two of them, Maggie and Sergio. And we learnt about this program. And they said, how would you like to be part of this? And they said, yes, it looks like very, very interesting and exciting to interact with such people.
From your view, how do the cultural, contextual, and aesthetic issues intersect?
I think architecture happens at the crossroad of philosophy, stroke aesthetics, geography, stroke culture, and, history. So we have a cross-section of the three, and this is where it really happens. And it's inevitable. And in different sort of societies, it happens differently. When I started practice in 1974, we had learned all this from, the exhausted Bauhaus studies. I mean, that's how the curriculum used to be. But when we actually started practice, and it took us to rural India, it was an eye-opener. We learned that the people there knew very well how to do things and how to make their context very, very relevant to their works. So there was a two-way process. I mean, one was learning from them, and one was interacting without repeating. One was evolving new solutions and learning the traditional techniques as well, and how to sort of put it in place in different locations. So, I mean, luckily or whatever, we had to work. India has such fascinating locations. We have the Himalayas, we have the desert of Rajasthan, we have the seashore, and we have hot, dry climate, we have hot, humid climate, we have very cold climate, extreme climates, and the responses have to be different in all these regions. And that's where your context started mattering very much. And then one was talking about what is exactly the meaning of context. It's a context it's a psychological thing for anybody. For instance, we have had some students from tribal areas coming to cities to learn. What is their context? There are certain things that get across to them, So context is not just physical, it's very, very sort of emotional and psychological thing. And how these two have an interface in the process of doing architecture becomes a very interesting proposition.
One of the very interesting things about this program is that students will be able to actively build and bring their own perspectives to this place, this courtyard
Yes,
in the monastery.
yes, yes. If I may give you the analogy of music, classical music is, for instance, in India, classical music is taught uh, by doing it, by learning, learning music straight away, not theorizing and not being verbose about it. You're actually doing and performing. So you're singing, and you don't theorize, you don't ask for the theory in advance. So there is no analysis which becomes a paralysis of your work. Analysis, too much of it, paralyzes your work. Because there are people who, do such in-depth study and research and are hesitant to actually put things together. We have to do both. We have to bring the ideas together and actually be able to build them as well. And we should be also able to distinguish between what is an idea that is buildable, what is relevant, and what is not. I think Christopher's article talks about that we have a problem here. There is one diagram. So there are these, I think there is the whole, the phenomenal activity, the whole phenomenology that you are confronting and looking at problem solving and the phenomena of life that Christopher also talks about in his books. And there is also the noumenal thing, that is the inward reality that is happening to each one of us. And there are certain universal coordinates, that certain universal archetypes in Jungian terms that we all share, and that's why we can talk, and that's why we can sort of share some ideas which seem relevant across frontiers, different frontiers. So I believe that both of these have to be very, very important. The understanding of the phenomena and understanding of the noumena. That what is the phenomena doing to you? And your response. Ultimately, it's your response to it. So you are not repeating, you are not, reproducing, but you are sort of working with it. And there is that's why you may call it evolution or whatever, deviation. And you have wonderful examples, in the world, that you repeat context, you deviate from the context, then you create context, and then you also destroy context. So you have, all these examples are there. Look at Gaudi's work. Where is the context? And you have Alhambra, and that is creating a context for me. It's a context that is created for the whole world, really. So there is, and then there is, of course, tearing the whole fabric of context, and that's probably to be avoided. And it's a call that every individual, at the individual and collective level, have had to take and will have to take forever. So I think this course probably would create a sort of platform where one can think harder on history, its significance, the traditions of actually understanding nature, and how to erase this dual aspect of nature. Because unless you are able to erase the duality between nature and you, as long as you are separate from the nature, you will always be the analyzer, and the stuff that you're analyzing is separate from you. And there'll be always this distinction.
Well, I think
as a doer, somehow they have to coalesce with each other.
Well, I think this is tremendously important, not only to go beyond that dualism in your head, but to go beyond it with your hand in the practice. And
yeah.
Hand-head itself is a type of dualism along those lines, but then also the idea of self and world.
You see, one of the things that the book also discusses is a kind of matrix which has 4 parts. And this matrix contains first is the self as community. The second is action coupled with awareness. The third is maintenance as renewal. And the fourth is regeneration with learning. So this is a kind of metrics that this small book discusses. And this diagram is actually where the individual and the collective are growing together. Each of these walls has an existence, and it has a collective existence, and it can grow. So this matrix then breaks up into 5 small parts. There could be 6, there could be 4, there could be 7, but at the moment it is into that. And then a number of people were interested in this in India. We had 6 or 7 workshops attended by practicing architects, teachers, and professors, and so on, and spontaneously organized by them. And out of that has emerged a project called History of Architecture. And some of us thought that actually we've never written History of Architecture. Historians have written History of Architecture, but we have not written History of Architecture as such. And said, is it possible to look at this? And so we formed a small group, and which consists of political scientists, a historian, an anthropologist, a sociologist, and a few of us who have been teaching and thinking together, architects, and identifying some projects, live project sites in wonderful locations, which are very historically significant to those contexts and those histories, and then thinking of, working on them for research. There's something that I think this thing is being done at the monastery, but there you are doing construction, and we are also thinking of doing something similar in a place called Mehrol, which is the oldest part of Delhi. So we're thinking of something like that there as well. And then you realize that, in fact, your consciousness is all similar, that you share your sorrows, your love, your affection, all this is common. And this is really, the way one handles this, one looks at this, these are universal things. And that makes our consciousness which is common, which is universal. And there is also the body, which is the individual, and the name and the ego. So how do we address this? And we are building things. And I've been recently looking at this work by Deleuze. Gilles Deleuze?
Yeah, oh yes, Gilles Deleuze. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and he talks about rhizomes. He talks about rhizomes, and he talks about multitudes, and he talks about nomadic aspect of ideas and so on, which is so interesting. But I think the individual has to learn that he is not somebody different, and he's part and parcel of the community, and as well as he retains his own individuality. So both, I think, have to sort of understand and not be divorced from each other.
Yes, I'd agree. Well, and the rhizomatic thinking, I think, is one of Deleuze's most important ideas.
Thanks, David. Nice talking to you.
Thank you. We look forward to more.
Okay. Yes.
All right.